They say that history repeats itself, and I am fearful that the Zimbabwe experience will not be unique to that country, and that soon Southern Africa will see even more clashes between civilians and government security forces as geriatric leaders claw to maintain power. I recently chatted with Ropa Dambire, a young Zimbabwean who experienced firsthand the shutdown Zimbabwe chaos. Here's her story.
Basically, what's happening in Zimbabwe is we're experiencing an economic crisis and a humanitarian crisis. I went back to Zimbabwe for the holidays in November, and one of the things that was going on at that moment is that the government had just announced that all the US dollars that were in the bank accounts have now been converted to RTGS. RTGS is basically the bond notes, and this is the currency that we have been using in Zimbabwe since about 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and it only works in Zimbabwe. Apparently, the bond notes were supposed to be 1:1 with the US dollar. So for every $1, you're supposed to have one bond note. So people had been saving. You're talking about businesses, normal people, churches who had their savings account and they were saving in US dollars, just waking up one day and you're being told that your money is now in bond notes. So there was unrest in the country. People are now tired because already there's been an inflation in the country. And apart from that, at that time, they were experiencing long queues for fuel because there were shortages of fuel. And also, when you tell the people that now you've got bond notes, your bond note is now just 5:1 to the US dollar, which means that the businesses are going to raise their prices for their goods. And the ones who were there with the raised goods, they're very expensive, and people can't buy these goods because they're very expensive. Imagine you've got 50 bond notes. That 50 bond note, the year before the last one, you could actually buy a decent grocery with that money. But now you can only buy about 3 or 5 basic commodities which you need in the house. And the shortages for fuel, you had to line up in the queue for fuel. Probably the fuel would come the next day. You're just there in the queue waiting for the fuel. And sometimes they'll tell you, no, we don't have fuel anymore. So you had to go back home and then come back. The basic civil servant is earning 300 bond notes. And this is a person who has a family. They want to pay their rentals. They want to pay for their groceries. They've got children who go to school. Some are probably in university, back and forth. Now, you're earning in bond notes. You no longer have the US dollars. You have to go to the bank. You queue up, and you only get 50 bond coins. Not the notes, the coins. The coins which you would have to later change into notes for it to make sense. People thought that when they were voting, maybe the opposition party was going to rule, and that did not happen. As usual, the ZANU-PF won. We put it in quotations. ZANU-PF won, and the opposition party is not ruling. So people are like, okay, so you did not hear our voice, and you promised us certain things that, okay, if I get into power, this and this is going to change. And it did not happen. Actually, now things are getting worse because we are experiencing the worst economic crisis we've ever had. Because right now, when you look at it, fuel, we have the highest priced fuel in the world, not just in Africa, not just in the SADC region, in the world, at 3.11 bond notes, which is the equivalent of about 45 rands per liter. It's unreasonable. The demonstrations were organized by Ivan Mawarire. They were supposed to be peaceful demonstrations to just tell them, the people were raising up their voice to say, we're tired of what we're going through. There's a 90% unemployment rate, yet we have got a country with about 15.73 million people. So that's 90% of 15.73 million people who are unemployed. And these people have degrees, master's degrees. Some of them are now selling in the streets, of which they've cleared those streets, and they say, no, you can't sell on the streets because we want our city to be clean. But what do you want those people to do? Where are they going to get their money? How are they going to survive? So people had to demonstrate, people had to protest, and it was supposed to be done peacefully. But I do guess from the frustration that the youths do have, it sort of turned into a violent protest, and people were looting shops, which was not part of what Ivan Mawarie had said, because he clearly stated that whenever we demonstrate, it's supposed to be peaceful. But of course, people being people, some obviously didn't understand him because they've just been there and they're tired. Look at a person who has been sitting at home for 10 years and yeah, they get tired. So because of the frustrations, the protests did turn violent. And when the government heard about the violent protests that were going on, they deployed the army troops so as to make sure that people would be safe. But of course, the army then, some of the people in the army, they then started brutally assaulting the civilians and the streets, and some of them were even innocent, because when you are having a protest, there are people who are going to be violent. Some of them were not violent at all. Some of them were just watching, but they began assaulting violently anyone who they saw in the streets. I remember one story that I encountered, I actually read it on Twitter, and it was about a man who was told to get out of his house, and then he left the family inside, 2 little children and the wife, and there were 2 armed military men, and they took turns to rape the lady, and whilst the children were watching. The first time, the man raped the woman and he went, and then the second man told her to go and take a bath, come back, and then raped her again.
This business of leaders being aware of the wrongs they see and condemning them must fall. What has condemning anything ever done for anyone? Many have condemned our president, the head of SADC's condemnation of the events that took place in Zimbabwe.
People were complaining about this all over on social media. And the president does have an account which he uses to communicate to the people. And he would see all these things, but he only got a wake-up call when this was suddenly reported on Sky News. And he had the guts, the audacity to say that after I heard this from Sky News, I have decided to take action. And everyone is like, so if Sky News hadn't taken action, you're really just going to ignore. This is not like... This was not only known by Sky News, everyone knew about it, everyone was posting their story online. And when people were posting out the stories online, that's when they said, okay, we are shutting down internet. So we had no internet for a whole week, and only one service provider, Econet, managed to actually tell the people, no, because the government has ordered us to shut down internet. We won't be rendering our services to you.
I reached out to the British High Commissioner, Kate Airy, and asked her about the sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe and why they aren't lifting them. She called me back and explained that the UK government's position is as follows. Currently, the EU has an arms embargo against Zimbabwe and active sanctions against former President Robert Mugabe, his wife Grace Mugabe, and the company Zimbabwe Defence Industries. There are also a small number of suspended sanctions. The UK and our EU partners continue to assess the appropriateness of sanctions on the basis of human rights and the wider political environment. EU sanctions do no damage to the wider economy or to the people of Zimbabwe. This left me perplexed because both the SADC chairperson, our president, and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa have called for these sanctions to be lifted, as if they affect all Zimbabweans. A newspaper article in Bulawayo 24 News has accused President Gebhardt of lying to the whole world about the present Zimbabwean socio-economic and political situation. Southern Africa People's Solidarity Network, a civic group, said that they were greatly disturbed and perturbed by the Namibian president's conduct, which clearly exposed his close links to the Zimbabwean president Emmerson Mnangagwa. SADC's statement in response to the Zimbabwean situation lacks balance, as it is only based on what Gebhardt was briefed by the president of Zimbabwe without being attentive to the citizenry voices regarding the situation. I reached out to the office of the president for a response to these allegations, and crickets. on Zimbabwe, we took to the streets to ask Namibians to share their thoughts on the Zimbabwean situation.
I feel like as an African, those guys, they are our brothers. They were also in the struggle.
Ek voel is verkeerd man, want net omdat die mense nou krag soek oor die land, beteken nie jy moet ander die res van die wêreld uitsluit nie. Nou word die mense, hoe maak jy die borders toe?
Well, my opinion is that I don't think it's fair that they actually cut down the necessities for these people.
So for them going through that, I feel like our country, in a few years' time, is also going to be in that same situation.
Daar is die regie, hoe stop jy die internet? Daar is nog erger verkeerd.
Zimbabwe practices, they're democratic, so people actually have rights to free and fair elections.
What is currently happening now in Zimbabwe is really bad, and I feel so sad, and what I can say is that we can only pray and trust God for a breakthrough.
So I think that we should not be laughing at them, but we should actually try to help them and come up with solutions as Africans to better ourselves as Africans.
They could probably come and seek asylum in Namibia. I mean, we have a refugee camp that's close to Ochibarongo. The people Angolans used to use in the past, but most of them have actually returned home right now. So that place is partially empty, so they could actually come here while things get better back home.
I chatted to Ropa Dambire, a Zimbabwean who's currently living in Namibia, about what the rest of the world and fellow Africans in particular can do to help the people of Zimbabwe.
It's very frustrating. I mean, we feel like no one cares at all because, firstly, Britain announced that they want more sanctions against Zimbabwe, but these sanctions are affecting who? They're affecting the people. They're affecting each and everyone in Zimbabwe, and our leaders don't care at all. They do not give a damn at all. Sorry. And SADC, they went on to say that ED has been appointed the chief security officer in SADC. And you're just like, okay, but he's the same man who has deployed troops into the city, and the military has been assaulting the civilians, raping people, brutally dealing with people. So how exactly is he going to be of help to SADC as the chief security officer? So we've come to a point where we're just like, we feel like no one really cares. We want our voice to be heard because at the moment, no matter. So we've tried to voice out our opinions through the demonstrations and protests, but the government hasn't taken they haven't done anything. They've just sat there. We are calling out for the national dialogue because we believe if at least he does talk to the leader of the opposition party, maybe something could change. But the president he doesn't want to have a dialogue with any one of the opposition leaders. And also we would like the other international leaders to just take a look into it, because apart from just saying things, no action has been done. And for him, I personally would prefer that he actually steps down from presidency, but obviously that's only my voice. I know other people do feel the same, but we've been crying out for the same thing over the past years, and still the ruling party is still ruling.